This video is a compilation video of my top 10 favorite DIYs that I made in 2020. It will be a mix of both Trash to Treasure and Dollar Tree DIYs in no particular order, but this one was my favorite. I wanted to use this box to create for myself a faux sewing machine drawer. I often see those drawers when out at vintage shops and they can be pretty pricey. So I wanted to try to make my own. I had this lion drawer pull that I found at a yard sale on that old drawer this summer. And then I also am going to use some blue ball jars that I picked up at the bins recently, as well as some florals that I already had in my stash. And then I also used twine, but that's not shown here. I used my Rust-Oleum linen white and I gave the box 2 coats of chalk paint. For the front of the drawer, I had the lion drawer pull, but a lot of times on these vintage sewing machine drawers, the drawer pull is on a medallion or some other type of embellishment on the front of the drawer. So I wanted to add an embellishment. So I went to my stash and I found this old miniature chalkboard. It did have a clothespin on the back of it initially, so I pulled that off and I gave it 2 coats of the linen white. Then I let that dry for a little while, and once it was dry, I came in with my 220 grit sandpaper and just started sanding off some of the paint so that I would have a distressed look on both the medallion and then also on the drawer itself. Next, I attached the lion drawer pull to the little miniature chalkboard that I had painted. I did at first use E6000, but that did not work, so I actually came back with my Tite Bond glue, and that worked like a charm. If you like what you're seeing, I'd love it if you'd hit the subscribe button for lots of great crafting inspiration in the new year. This video is part of a collaboration hosted by Robin Johnson. I will link her channel and a playlist in my description box below. I let that dry for about 20 minutes and then I took my glue again and glued the whole piece to the front of the drawer. And once that was dry, I filled the drawer with my canning jars that I had put florals in. I should add, some point in this process, I also wrapped twine around the tops of the canning jars. Here is my finished product. Sorry, the lighting in this shot is not the best. I always craft late at night, so the lighting is always poor. I absolutely love how it turned out. My next project in my top 10 is a Dollar Tree DIY. For this project, you'll need 2 frames. I chose one that fits within the other, a square and a rectangle, and the frames I chose also have a channel around the edge. Then you'll need some wooden beads. I got mine from Amazon, and then also 2 glass candlesticks from the Dollar Tree. The first thing I did was to open up the frames and then give both the frame and the glass a coat of chalk paint. Acrylic paint might also work, I'm not really sure, but anytime I'm painting on glass, I usually use chalk paint or spray paint. I did remove the picture frame stand from the back of the one picture frame. The other one did not have that because it was made as a piece of wall decor, so it actually had a sawtooth hanger on it, and I also removed that. While the chalk paint was drying, I went ahead and glued the candlesticks together end to end because that was going to be the center post of my 2-tiered tray. I used both E6000 and hot glue because E6000 gives that permanent hold and the hot glue holds it together while the E6000 is drying. And I used my crafting rag to wipe away any excess glue that had kind of squeezed out the side. Once the chalk paint was dry on both of the trays, I used my hot glue to attach the wooden beads into that channel that I mentioned. And the hot glue was ideal for this. You get a really good hold on wood to hot glue. That's why I didn't need to use E6000 for this step. For my 2 trays, it wound up taking about 120 beads. That's about a third of the package that I buy on Amazon. Now, these are created as beads, so they do have a hole in them. So when I was putting them on, I kind of put them hole to hole, which is fine until you get to the end. You can see the hole, but that's okay. We will fill that later and you won't be able to tell at all. And once all of the beads were attached to the tray, I flipped it over and I used 4 larger beads. The package from Amazon comes with 2 sizes, so I used 4 of the larger beads as feet for my tray. And off camera, I did also give the bottom of this tray another coat of paint because I wasn't satisfied with that first coat. Then once all of the beads were attached, I got a brush. This is a larger brush. And I actually dry brushed the beads with some white paint. And I made sure to go back. I didn't want it to look like I just kind of ran my brush across the top. I did want it to look like the beads were kind of completely dry brushed. So I just made sure I got some paint in all of the crevices so that it had kind of an even look to it. And here's a close-up shot so you can kind of see what the dry brushed beads look like. And then I used the same technique on the feet. Here's what the smaller square tray looked like when it was done, but it still had those bead holes that we talked about earlier. So I took my spackle, and this you can get at the Dollar Tree. I think I got mine at Ace Hardware. It's just something we had in our garage. And originally I was going to use a popsicle stick to try to get it to go into the holes. That didn't work super well, and I wound up just using my finger. I did wind up breaking a piece off of my popsicle stick, and I kind of used it as like a mini putty knife because sometimes my finger got putty where I didn't want it to be, and I kind of had to get it out of the crevices. So that worked pretty well. Somewhere in here, I did take my candlestick outside and I spray painted it. This was actually the next day. And so I spray painted it with 2 coats of that Rust-Oleum 2X flat Blossom white spray paint. And it looks just like the chalk paint, so that was good. And then I used my E6000 and my hot glue trick again. Once my glue was applied, I attached the candlestick to the bottom center of the top tray. So I flipped the top tray over and glued the candlestick to the center of the top tray first. And then I glued the whole thing to the center of the bottom tray. And so you can see here I wiggled it just a little to make sure the angles were correct. And then I applied a bit of pressure just to make sure I got a good seal. And then I wiped away any excess glue that squeezed out. And here's the finished product. I love how it turned out, but the fun of a tiered tray is, of course, styling it. So here it is, all styled in my decor. I absolutely love how it turned out. I figure my frames were $1 a piece, the candlesticks were $1 a piece, and my beads all in total cost me about $6 for a total of $10. Not too shabby. Next are a few DIYs I did for last year's winter decor. I wanted to upcycle this chalkboard into a sign to go on my new bookshelf that I was styling. I wanted it to have a wintry saying. Now the frame of the chalkboard was unfinished, so I went ahead and taped it off, and then I painted it first with black acrylic paint, and then I covered that with white chalk paint. And I often use this technique because I like the distressed look, and a lot of times if there's no finish underneath white paint, when you sand it off, it really won't show anything through, and you really don't get that nice distressed effect. So painting the black first allows you to have something that will show through your white paint when you distress it. So I painted 1 coat of black acrylic and then 2 coats of white chalk paint. And then when I was done, I lost the footage, sorry, but I wrote this phrase, "Silver white winters that melt into spring," and I used my new Arteza chalk markers that they sent me. I really love how this turned out, and I love how it looks on my new bookshelf. It's actually an old bookshelf that I upcycled. It was black, and I painted it white. For my next project, I had this wooden black pedestal that I got at a thrift store back in the summer. And I wanted to use this in my family room decor on a table to lift up some of my decor. So it's a nice way to create vignettes and be able to raise some things up while other things stay at table level. So I had a leg up on this project. It was already dark, so I didn't need to put a dark coat under the white. So I painted 2 coats of the Rust-Oleum linen white onto the pedestal. And once it was painted, I got my 80 grit sandpaper, and that's what I usually use for distressing, or sometimes I'll wet distress, but I just didn't do that this time. So I sanded off the paint in the places where it seemed like it was raised and where it would naturally receive wear. And again, because the dark finish was underneath, it showed through nicely. I was really pleased with how it turned out. For my next project, I'll be flipping this nightstand. I picked it up off the trash years ago, and then within the last 2 years, the bottom drawer broke, but I just kept using it, and it was just a broken piece of furniture in my family room. So I did decide to paint it. Outside of this footage, I did sand it down a little bit just to rough up the finish. And then I decided I would use my same Rust-Oleum linen white that I use on many, many things. So I did wipe down each area with a rag before I painted it, and then I gave it 2 good coats of Rust-Oleum white, linen white paint. For the one drawer that is left, I sanded it down a little bit and then gave it 2 coats of my Rust-Oleum aged gray chalk paint. And then once all the paint was dry, I took my rag and got my Rust-Oleum aged glaze and applied a little bit of aged glaze into all the cracks and crevices. You just wipe it on and wipe it off until it looks the way you want it to. And I did the same with the body of the nightstand as well.
Good, I like that.
And once everything was dry, I came in with my Rust-Oleum matte clear and I put a coat of it on the top of the nightstand as well as on the drawer, just to give it a little added protection. Off camera, I used my Rust-Oleum aged bronze spray paint to change the color of the hardware. I really like how it turned out. And then I went ahead and put the hardware back on the next morning once everything was dry. Now, I still had to deal with the problem of the broken bottom drawer. I had purchased this basket to use in the bottom, but I needed to put a brace for it. Ideally, I would put a shelf down below, but I don't have the wood for that right now. So I decided to just use these little pieces of wood from my garage to act as a brace. So I painted each of them white and then put them into the bottom, and that holds the basket up so that it doesn't fall through the bottom of the nightstand.
It's a lot of work. All right, now, aha, woo, yes, fantastic. What do you think, Mom? Looks great. I love it.
And here's what the finished piece looks like. I absolutely adore how it turned out. It's in my family room. I used the basket to store vintage linens that I use to decorate all the time. And then I used some baskets and things to organize other decorative items into the drawer. And then I added some decor to the top of it. Another favorite project from this year was this table that I got from my mother-in-law. It was missing its center brace, but that's fine because I use it currently behind my couch, and so that doesn't really matter. I could at some point replace that brace, but in this project, I didn't take the time to do that.
So I'm going to paint it white, and I'm going to put a little stencil on it, which this usually has 2 lamps, which you can even kind of see where they were. So the stencil will be mostly covered, but I'll do it in different areas. So based on, what objects I put on the table, that's, some parts of the stencil will show. So that's the plan.
So with this table, I did come in first and give it a good sanding to get a lot of the old finish off. And then I did wipe it down with a damp rag. Then I went ahead and used my roller this time to give it 2 coats of white paint. I did not use chalk paint. I used a flat white paint that I had in the house.
Table is painted. And now I'm stenciling it. I plan to just do like a, a trail of birds across the table just to give it a little something different. And then I'm going to antique the whole thing and sand some of the paint off and even scuff up some of the stenciling so it doesn't look so new. And that's how I'm gonna go.
Unfortunately, the footage of me actually doing the stenciling got messed up, but basically what I did was place the stencil where I wanted the birds and then put a coat of white paint over the birds that I was going to stencil, let the white paint dry a little bit, and then I would put my gray paint on top of it and then remove the stencil.
Here's the finished product. I love it. It does actually still need a top coat, but because of the situation in the world, I don't have the top coat I want to use, which is a polyacrylic, and I don't have a brush with which to apply it. It looks a little streaky because I just wiped it down, but I am very happy with how it turned out. So much better than where it started.
And here's the finished table tucked back behind my couch again and decorated. I love how the birds look peeking out from under the decorative objects. It's just a little bit of whimsy. And I love the white because the dark finish before kind of made it like a hole back there, and this just reflects the light, which is really nice.
In the next Trash to Treasure, my friend Tammy and I decided to dupe these faux peony arrangements that were being sold online, 2 for $280. So for this project, you need a vessel that looks like the one in the inspiration. You need flowers. I've got my wire cutter so I can trim mine down. She already trimmed hers down at home. And then we've got this, and this is why we're doing it together. This is a little expensive. It's the acrylic water. So we have this, and we're gonna share it because, you know, once you make it, it's like, what do you do with the rest of it? All in total for mine, it's still under $20, and yours is obviously under $20. So, and then it does warn that you have to wear gloves. So I just don't wanna overcut. I'm trying to avoid overcutting. Pull that baby up. It's gonna be pretty. They look real. So to keep them in just a slightly upright fashion while it dries, I'm gonna wire them. I am going to start with the hardener. It says to mix the hardener gently. We're gonna mix it all up because between the two projects, we think that's about what we'll use. I'm mixing in the resin. I hope nothing blows up. I feel like a chemist. 20 seconds left. It looks different. It's like clearer than it was. It was cloudier. It doesn't feel thicker yet, but it definitely looks different. Okay, so now I want you to pour it in and then put the flowers down. All right. Oh, that looks good. Okay, so this is what they look like. I think they look gorgeous. I do like Tammy's though. Look at that. Look at how, like, hers looks like crystal clear water. Really pretty. And here's mine. I don't want to move it, but just so you can kind of see what it looks like from the angles. I got this at a yard sale last year for 50 cents, and I got this at a different yard sale for 50 cents. I'm going to put them together and turn them into a pedestal planter. So I'm going to wipe them down and then glue them together and then spray paint them and then do a floral arrangement.
For this project, I used my Titebond glue because I like the seal that you get with that glue. I let that dry for about 2 hours while I was working on other projects, and then I covered the handles, the rope handles, in painter's tape and gave it 2 good coats of my Rust-Oleum 2X spray paint. I had to wait a few hours to finish this project, which is why I'm inside now. But next I removed the painter's tape from the handles, and you can see that there was no paint that got on the rope handles, which was really nice. So this is what it looked like all painted up. Then I used some floral foam that I had in my stash from the Dollar Tree, as well as that little birdhouse, which I got from Target a few years ago, and a wooden dowel, which I originally bought at Michael's. And I attached the wooden dowel to the birdhouse using hot glue. And then I needed to trim the dowel. It was a little long, so I used this little saw that I have from the Dollar Tree. So I trimmed it to the right height, and then I just grabbed some florals from my stash, and I just started filling my little planter with florals. I didn't glue anything in because I actually intend to use this out on my porch once the weather turns. I'll put some rocks in the bottom for drainage, and then I can put a plastic pot in it that holds a plant. So I won't actually plant in this planter, but I'll put a little plastic pot with a plant into it. So I wanted to be able to easily remove this floral arrangement. And so I'll just be able to pull out the, the foam as a single unit, and then I can keep this for next spring too. But for now, I'm going to enjoy it inside my house. And here's the final product. I love the white with the gray and the pops of color from the florals. And I love that it's multi-purpose. I'll be able to use it indoors for spring and then bring it outside for summer. For my next craft project, I had seen this sign at Hobby Lobby and loved it, but I really wanted to try to make one that would work in a coastal theme. So for the base of my version, I decided to use this piece of decor that I got at Dollar Tree last year. I have a few of these in my stash, and then I pulled out an old sign that I also used to use in my decor, and then I'm also going to use this sign from Dollar Tree as well. I got this because I wanted the little metal stars that were on it. You can see those are already off, but I am going to use the sign. I'm also using these wooden beads that I order from Amazon. It's a really good deal, much better than Dollar Tree or Michael's. And then some twine from my stash. I'm also going to use some chalk paint, which you'll see in a moment. So the first step was to take the canvas or painting or whatever you want to call it. It's not actually painting, but to take the picture off of the frame, because again, I'm just going to be using the frame. So I tried to use my needle nose pliers. That didn't work very well. So then I went at it with a screwdriver. That worked better, but then I realized you actually can just tug upwards on the canvas and the little staples come out pretty easily. And I just gave the frame as well as the thankful piece of decor 2 coats of chalk paint. And I took the USA sign and I measured where I wanted to cut this so that I would have a backing to put into the little frame. And I am going to be painting this on both sides. I will be sanding off the USA off of the back and just, doing my best to cover that up, but that won't be an issue. But the front, this blank side will be the front that's facing out in the project. I just used my carpenter square and a box cutter to score the little sign, and then I snapped it at the seam. And then I gave this little backing board 2 coats of white chalk paint. I did start painting it in the wrong direction, and you'll see I switched directions because the idea here is that I'm going to use a paint technique to make this look like fence boards. So you want to paint in the direction that you want your fence boards going. So I wanted them in this vertical direction, so that's why I changed course with my paintbrush. And once the white paint was dry, I came in with my paint technique. So what I do is I take a lid to like a sour cream container. You could take, any kind of plate or whatever it is that you use to put your paint on. And I squeezed out a darker gray color and then a dark brown. I think mine is called coffee bean. And then some black and then a little bit of a white color. I just had this cream on hand, so I used that. It doesn't really matter. And then you want a brush with bristles, like this one that I'm using, and a little bit of water. And you dip your paintbrush in that paint, but you make sure that the colors don't blend too much. So you're kind of use like a dry brush almost. And so you can see I'm just wiping it on, but I want the different colors to show. And then I wipe the paint off with a damp rag. So I'm just putting some paint on and then wiping it off and putting some more on and wiping it off. And what this does is it creates the look of weathered wood. So because the Hobby Lobby one, they stained their frame, but I couldn't do that because I wasn't working with real wood. So I decided to do a white frame around my picture and then do weathered wood on the inside. And I thought that worked really well with the coastal theme. So here's what it looks like when it's done. And then I came in with my carpenter square again and I marked off sections of 2 inches. And then I'm going to use my carpenter square to draw the lines of the fence post because you want to make sure you have lines that make it look more like boards instead of like just a Dollar Tree sign. So I used a very thin Sharpie marker just to draw the fence board lines. And this is what it looks like when it's all done. I did use my laser transfer method. I can link a video above where I explain that a little better. But basically you print an image out on a laser printer, you print it backwards, and then you apply polyacrylic just to the side of the paper that has the printing on it, and then a little bit of polyacrylic to the object that you're applying it to. And then you apply the paper. Don't put any polyacrylic on top of it, but you use a credit card or some kind of other flat device to get the bubbles out. You let it dry at least 4 hours, but preferably overnight, which is what I did. And at this point, I was prepping to go to bed, but I just wanted to glue the little piece into the frame. So I used my Type-On glue. And again, this needs a lot of dry time. It's kind of like E6000 in that way. You don't use it on all the same things that use E6000, but it's a good wood glue. So I applied the tight bond and I stuck the little backing into the frame and I clamped it and I let it dry overnight as well. The next morning it was all dry, so I took my clamps off and then I got a little cup of water and a little rag, clean rag, and you basically just apply water to that piece of paper that you've put on with polyacrylic and you rub until the paper comes away and it leaves behind the image. Now you do see a little bit of shininess where the polyacrylic is, and that's because I'm using satin because I got mine for really cheap at a yard sale. But if you're buying the polyacrylic, I think if you buy the matte finish, you wouldn't see as much of it. It doesn't bother me, but you know, that just is something that you might want to consider. Here's what it looks like when it's finished. Sky above, sand below. I love it. And then I had previously strung these beads from Amazon. They're just in a large, small pattern. And if you saw in the inspiration piece, there was just a little string of beads across the project, which I think just adds so much to it. So I went ahead and I just glued these on using hot glue. Then I added a little twine bow to it and I glued the whole piece to the base. Here's what it looks like finished. I just love it. I am planning to use it on top of this cabinet that I have to the left of my couch in my living room where I have some other coastal decor. For my last project in my top 10 DIYs of 2020, I wanted to share with you this little wagon that I duped in the fall. I saw it at Michael's and I made one for my home decor. The shape really reminded me of the little galvanized tubs here that you can get from the Dollar Tree. So that's what I decided to use as my base. And then I also, for the wheels, I decided to use these little containers. They are new to Dollar Tree. I got them from the crafting section and I'm actually going to use the lid parts of them. And then I also pulled more dowels out of my stash and my craft paint. The Michaels ones came in several different colors. I decided to make mine white, and I love the look of black and white enamelware, so that's what I actually wanted to do for mine. So I made mine look like enamelware. This metal tub is actually a little bigger than the one at Michael's, which is nice. It'll make for a nicer arrangement. The Michael's one was priced at $12.99 with that coupon. It was like at $9.09. Mine will come out to like $3 and change. Not a huge savings, but again, I'm getting to customize it to the enamelware, which I really like. And mine will be a little bit bigger. I went ahead and painted it to look like the enamelware first, and I just used my brush to put the little black edge on the top. And then I went ahead and painted all of my wheels black. You can see that here. And then I wanted to see where I wanted those wheels to wind up. And I just used my dowels to create two basically axles for the wheels. Now my wheels will not spin. If I had spent more time and felt like it, I could have made them spin, but honestly that doesn't matter to me. I'm not going to be pulling this thing. It's just going to be sitting on a shelf for decor. So I used hot glue. Caveat, I definitely needed E6000, but my E6000 got left behind at a birthday party, so I need to get more. So if you decide to do this project, you should definitely use super glue or E6000 because this does not provide a great hold with the hot glue, and I'll probably go back and re-glue it. Look at that. Looks like a barbell, doesn't it? And also there's my puppy sleeping on the couch. Isn't he cute? And after I was done making my little axles, I attached them to the bottom with the hot glue. Again, E6000 would have been much more effective. Now, I probably could have stopped with the project right here, but I wanted to add some of the details that I had seen on the Michaels piece. This is what it looks like right now. And so I took this hook thing from the Dollar Tree because I always see people doing Dollar Tree crafts like taking these off like butter. I don't know, maybe I'm weak, didn't have the right tool, I don't know, but I really struggled to get that metal hook off. But I did eventually get it off using a pliers and a wire cutter. And I took my pliers and I kind of bent the end, and I wanted to make a slit in the side of my tub so that I could kind of hook this onto the edge so that it would actually function as a little handle. So I used my husband's drill and I just drilled a series of holes in a horizontal line and kind of attached them to make a slit. And then I also glued little
the tops of little push pins. So I had snipped them off with a wire cutter and painted them silver, and I wanted to use them as if they're the things holding the wheels on the wagon. So they're little silver caps on the wheels. And then I took my handle and I slipped it into that slit that I had made using my husband's drill. And then I kind of bent the handle closed so that it would stay on. And here's what my little wagon looks like. I think it's adorable. You know, there wasn't much to the one at Michael's anyway, so it's not a perfect dupe, but I'm pleased enough with it, and it was only a fraction of the cost.
And that's it for my top 10 DIYs in 2020. Please go ahead and hit that subscribe button for lots of great crafting in 2021. Happy New Year!